Okay, there we go. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our 2022 Natural Living Workshop with Herbalist Lily Kunning. We are so thrilled that she has continued to provide these classes for another year. And today she's going to be talking about food as medicine. So welcome, Lily.
Thank you. So I prepared a slideshow. It's so weird to do this class in particular as a Zoom class because, you know, the way that I've always taught this class before is I'm literally like up there chopping up food, making recipes, giving samples for people to try. And so it's kind of weird doing it this way. And so it's obviously more of a lecture, and I'm going to cover a bunch of different topics. And if there is a topic that you'd like to see that I'm not covering, you know, please either type in the chat window or unmute yourself to ask a question, because I really want these classes to be applicable and relevant to the people that attend. So I also have a lot of phlegm from the changing weather, so if I cough, that's why. But I wanted to talk about food as medicine today because honestly, food is how our body builds itself, right? Nutrition is critically important to well-being and health. And if you're compromised in your health in any way, there are ways that you can take in certain foods. You know, they have certain phytochemicals in them. Phytochemicals means chemicals from plants that are gonna benefit you. And so, you know, one of the things that is always really disturbing to me is that medical doctors don't know a whole lot about nutrition, actually. They get about a semester of nutrition in medical school, and they don't. It's much more of a holistic topic. And the way that we train our doctors in this country is they become specialized and they narrow their focus, which can be great if, you know, you want to operate on brains. But if you're a general practitioner, you're going to want much more of a diverse background in how all these different elements contribute to well-being and health. Today, we're going to talk about actual scientific studies and some of the falsehoods that come with food. There's a lot of crazy ideas out there on the internet about what we should be eating. And we're going to talk about what's real and some ideals that you can strive for, and maybe eliminate some of the baggage that many people have around food, and how to get there. So so that's what we're going to talk about. Let's go on to the next slide. Yeah, so like I said, food is how we build our new cells. Garbage in, garbage out is what most nutritionists say. And we've known for decades that most of the chronic disease, organ failure, premature deaths that happen in the world have to do with us either not having routine physical activities, smoking, or not eating well. Now, the only complicated variable, according to this doctor, is eating well. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Obviously, smoking is either a yes or a no, right? Where you're either smoking or you're not. You're either moving around and getting some physical activity or you're not. But eating is complicated. And so we're going to go into some of the reasons why it's complicated. Go ahead and next. Okay, so food insecurity. Number one, we have a ton of malnourished people in this country. Before the pandemic, 1 in 6 people were food insecure, meaning they went without a meal or nutrition on a given day. It's actually higher now because of the pandemic. I've heard statistics as high as 1 in 4. You know, people are on fixed incomes. Maybe they can't afford it. They can't access food benefits, or they live in a neighborhood where fresh food is not available. They have a corner market and it's a bunch of highly processed, not really very nutritious food in their neighborhood. And so they have to make an extra trip, or maybe they don't have a car, or there's just so many reasons for food insecurity. We also live in a country that doesn't believe food is a human right. They believe you have to pay for it, and that's not always applicable to everybody. We also don't distribute the food very well in this country, and there's lots of waste on the part of some people and going without on the part of others. We have entire sections of Columbus that don't have a supermarket with fresh produce right here in Columbus. And that has to do with poverty. So there are organizations like Local Matters and some other things that are working on eliminating food deserts and educating people on how to get good food and bringing produce in. There's another really amazing organization that specifically targets food deserts in Columbus called Food Not Bombs, and they distribute free for the taking, no questions asked, produce and other food every Saturday. Every Saturday you can go and get in line and take what you need. It's one of the most generous and giving organizations. It's all volunteer. So if you're interested in that, you can always contact me and I'll tell you where, or you can look on Facebook. They have a Facebook presence for Food Not Bombs Columbus. And there's a lot of ignorance and lack of education on nutrition. And if you're relying on the internet, you may have actually fallen prey to some bad information. We'll find out. There's a lot of fad diets out there that aren't scientifically sound. The idea of going on a diet is actually not scientifically sound. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and most of it is due to marketing. Somebody is making money off of the idea that, you should take this diet or you should eat these products. So we're going to kind of work on debunking those so that you can kind of see through some of the marketing hype. Next. So what are the culprits in the United States? I have some pictures here. Highly processed food and restaurant food tends to be really unhealthy. There are some notable exceptions in the restaurant world, but generally speaking, restaurants use more sugar, more salt, and more fat than you would when you were cooking for yourself. If you're relying on pre-made foods that you get at the supermarket, whether they're boxed or bagged foods like the center here with the Lunchables and the snack items, or you're relying on restaurants to make food for you, you are probably not getting optimum nutrition. And the one thing that I will say about this whole picture is, where are the vegetables? Right? A lot of these foods are familiar. And I eat some of these foods, right? But the typical American diet is woefully short on plant matter. Next slide. So the real culprits that basically fill up calories and fill up, recipes of ingredients that are not good for you are all kinds of additives and colorings. The things that I call not food that are in your food. If you look at labels, I encourage you to be a label reader. If you're going to buy a box of crackers, what's in those crackers? Can you pronounce everything in those crackers? Do you recognize the ingredients that are on that label? And if not, what are they? And what do they do? Why are they in this recipe? Chances are they're in the recipe for preservative or shelf stabilization so that they can keep the item on the shelf for longer. And most of the chemicals that are in our processed food that actually make us sick are these kinds of things. They're preservatives and shelf stabilizers or homogenizers, making a product uniform in texture. You'll also see, so I don't know how many of you know how to read a nutrition label, but one of the things that you should know is that it is by law required that all the ingredients are in quantity order. So the thing that is listed first is the biggest part of the recipe. So if you look at the top recipe, the number one ingredient is corn flour, followed by sugar, right? So sugar being number two ingredient, there's probably a lot of sugar in that particular product. If you look at the one that has the nutrition facts, sugar is the number one product. I can't remember at this point what product I took these screenshots from, but they're all boxed American products. So excess sugar and carbohydrates are bad for us. They mess with your pancreas, right? And in the United States, we have a higher instance of diabetes, pre-diabetes, and hypoglycemia than anywhere else. And it's because of our diet. If we think back to the first quote, that most chronic disease is caused by three things, which include nutrition, a lot of chronic problems that we see in the United States are definitely directly linked to not eating well. That includes diabetes, that includes heart problems, that includes liver and gallbladder issues, that includes the generic sort of diagnosis of IBS and IBD. That also includes things like depression. So your gut is the epicenter of your body. And the digestive tract is the first thing that is created in a new creature, whether that's a human or, a puppy. When a zygote is becoming its full being, the first thing that's created is the alimentary canal that goes from the mouth to the anus. And all of those things develop first. Because if you think about it, we all need to eat every day. And that needs some time. Now, as it's developing, it's not just by itself, the digestive tract. It is also the number one place for most of your immune system. It's also highly innervated. So the nervous system centralizes here. Like everyone thinks of the brain and then there's just a bunch of nerves everywhere around your body. But honestly, your gut is your second brain. And a lot of your nerves come out, after spending some time in the digestive tract. It's also another epicenter besides your pituitary gland for your endocrine system. So all of those glands that produce hormones, like your adrenal glands, your pancreas, your thyroid, all of those things are affected by what you put in your body. And if we put solvents and chemicals and preservatives that disrupt our endocrine system and a bunch of carcinogens like BHA and BHT or nitrates in our bodies, it's going to affect more than just our digestive tract, although it definitely will affect our digestive tract. One of the common disorders that people are talking about now is being gluten sensitive, right? We talk about gluten as being a problem. But I would argue, and the science kind of bears this out, that it's not actually gluten. So when gluten sensitive people and this is separate from people that have Crohn's disease, right? They are actually allergic to the protein, the wheat protein called gluten. But people who are sensitive and have very real bodily symptoms when they eat gluten in this country, they can go to other countries like in Europe, eat pasta, eat baguettes in France, and not have the same issues. The reason is because our food is not as regulated. How we grow food in this country is very commercialized and industrialized. And we use chemicals that are banned in other countries. And one of the things that happens with wheat in this country, if it's not certified organic, is that they spray glyphosate on the wheat crops 3 days before harvest, and it makes it really easy for the combine to come through and get it all. It just like completely sort of disintegrates because that's an herbicide, right? Well, there's no way of getting that off, even if they tried, but they don't. They don't rinse it. They don't do anything. And then they process it into flour. Well, that glyphosate doesn't go away. Glyphosate is actually in the vast majority of processed foods that contain grain in the United States, because we are allowed, well, not we, but farmers in this country are allowed to use it, commercial farmers. And it is a carcinogen. It is an endocrine disruptor, and I would argue that it probably causes severe inflammation and cramping in the gut over time, the more you're exposed to it. So all of those generic sort of diagnoses of IBS and IBD or gluten sensitivity, I would argue that it's toxic chemicals that is in our food supply. So there's that. And then the real culprits also are too much of any one thing, right? I am guilty of binge eating something that I've been craving, but if I did that all the time, or I wasn't craving different things, I wouldn't be getting sound nutrition. Because the one thing a nutritionist will tell you is that you need to eat a variety of foods. And within each classification of food, like vegetables, you need to eat a variety of vegetables and a variety of meats if you eat meat, or protein sources. And so too much of anything is a problem. And again, if you have any questions along the way, please put them in the chat or unmute yourself. So what is the ideal diet? I'm talking a lot about the bad stuff, but you know, anyone can talk about the bad stuff, but how do we get to the good stuff, right? So the ideal diet is plant-focused. Now, some people are completely plant-based. They are vegetarian or vegan, and that vegetarianism is completely sustainable. It's actually harder to sustain a 100% vegan diet in the long term without supplementation to stay healthy, but that's a separate issue. If you want to talk to me about that, I can. But it should be plant-focused. The vast majority of your plate, or at least half of it, should be vegetable matter. And that's like the rule in my house, right? So when we're making a meal and we're planning, we look at our plate and half of it is vegetables and greens and a little bit of grain maybe. And then we have a quarter of it being some sort of protein source, and then there's something else. We also want to focus on whole food, not processed food. When we cook, we're processing the food ourselves, but we're in charge of that processing. We know how much salt goes in, we know how much oil we use, and we're, you know, making the nutrition actually more bioavailable by cooking. We're breaking it down slightly so that when we absorb it, when we ingest it, our digestive tract has the ability to really get out as much nutrients as possible. The way that digestion works is that there's two stages. There's mechanical and then there's chemical. Mechanical starts in the mouth where you're chewing everything up, you know, you're like a cement mixer. And it continues when it gets to the stomach. So the stomach does both chemical and mechanical digestion. So you can't feel it, but it's actually acting like a cement mixer, rolling all the things around that you chewed up, while it also bathes it in certain chemicals, stomach acid, bile, different kinds of enzymes that come from your pancreas and your stomach. They're all working to liquefy it as much as possible. So chewing really well is actually advantageous, right? You want to get those pieces as small as possible so that your stomach doesn't have to do it. And then the stomach is going to move it around while it's bathing it in all these chemicals so that when it moves to the small intestine a couple hours later, that all of the small intestine's work is to extract all of the nutrition that our bodies can use and get it to the right place. It breaks it down. All those amino acids, vitamins, minerals have been broken down by chemicals, and then we can absorb them in our small intestine. Whole food is definitely more rife with vitamins, minerals, and amino acids than if you bought a processed food. So making your own pizza at home, especially if you like make your own dough, right? You have organic flour, you know it doesn't have any glyphosate in it because it's organic flour. You make your dough and you know exactly how much oil and how much salt got put in that dough. You make your sauce and you put whatever it is on your pizza, that's going to be way more nutritious for you, and is actually a very balanced meal if you make it yourself with some vegetables, than if you bought a pizza at a pizza joint, or you bought a frozen pizza, even if it has vegetables on it, right? Cooking for yourself is the number one way to stay healthy when it comes to food.
Lily,
And
we have a question in the chat, and the
Sure.
question is turkey and chicken considered plant-based? I heard that once.
No, no, it is not. So, chicken and turkey are animals. When I say plant-based, so plant-based has become a euphemism for veganism. When I say plant-focused, I'm trying to use that term because I feel like most of what you eat should be plants. Michael Pollan says, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. That's his advice, right? He's a food writer. And plant-based means vegetables, greens, grains, vegan. Chicken and turkey are, of course, animals. You can eat them in a plant-focused diet, but if you are using plant-based the way that the vegan movement is using it, it's definitely not. They're not, I'm not saying they're unhealthy though. Like, I eat chicken, I eat turkey. You want to focus on the quality of your ingredients for sure. And one thing I will say about eating meat is that if you eat meat that you cook yourself, and look for high quality, humanely raised meat. The reason that the way that the animal is raised matters is because if you're looking at a farmer that's a small rancher and cares for their animals, they're not going to pump them full of antibiotics. They're not going to neglect their health. They're not going to be in overcrowded conditions, eating their own feces or urine. They will have a good life, and they will have a good death. And studies show that animals that are living on pasture, they get to roam around outside and forage for their food, whether that's grass for like a cow, or bugs and weird little rando bits for chickens. That meat is actually healthier. It has a higher instance of healthy omega acids. It has healthier instances of protein, vitamins, and minerals, less cholesterol too. Grass-fed beef has less cholesterol than commercially raised beef that is fed corn. So if you are going to eat meat, I suggest eating less of it, and focusing, since you're going to be eating less of it, using the budget that you would have for a bunch of meat to get high quality pastured meat. And the ideal, of course, this last point, is realizing that there's no one magic bullet. Learning to cook and learning about nutrition is a process, and it requires time and effort. It's not like you can't just subscribe to a company that makes shakes for you and you can just blend them and that's it. Because chances are you're not going to stay on that particular diet for very long. It gets pretty boring, and you're going to add more things in. So as you add more things in, you learn to cook. You learn how to balance nutrition. That's the way to live a healthy lifestyle. And that's the thing, like, diet culture is centered on a short-term goal, usually weight loss, which, by the way, is not a health goal. But learning about nutrition and learning how to cook is a lifetime endeavor, right? You do it every day. Excuse me. So how do we get there? How do we get to the place, especially if you're uncomfortable and don't know where to start, to learn about nutrition and learn about how to cook it yourself? Well, YouTube is a really great place to learn about nutrition, as long as you're not looking at commercialized feeds, like for a specific diet program or for a specific product. If you look up nutritionists on YouTube, that would be helpful, because nutritionists actually have an entire degree on human nutrition. Unlike a doctor, like I said, that only gets a semester or so of nutrition. So reading and watching unbiased, non-commercialized videos for whole food cooking. And by the way, this advice goes for everything, right? If you're looking for valid information on any given topic, make sure you look at the source and make sure that the source is objective and not seeking to profit from giving you advice.
And Lily, I'm going to do a quick plug
Oh,
for our Cooking for Wellness classes with
yay.
Chef Jason and our dietitian, because they do focus on whole food cooking. And as Chef is showing how to cook at home, the dietitian is sharing all the nutritional value of the ingredients he's cooking with. So I had to do a quick plug for our Cooking for Wellness class.
For sure. When is that?
We have one coming up this coming Thursday at 6 o'clock.
Awesome. Thursday at 6 o'clock. That sounds great. No, I'm really grateful to Cancer Support Community for providing so many amazing classes with people who know what they're talking about. Like, that to me is just invaluable. Like, cutting through all the weird internet chatter and marketing is really great. When you are shopping at the grocery store, if you are still shopping at the grocery store and not getting things delivered, think about the outside aisles of the grocery store. So when you think about how a grocery store is designed, and it's designed this way intentionally, the outside aisles are all the fresh things, right? You've got produce usually when you first walk in, and that's to give the impression of like, oh, everything's so fresh here. Everything's so, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, fresh. Let's just go with that. So you enter in produce, and if you stick to the outside, you're getting produce, dairy, meat, bakery, and what's the other one? Just all the outside. But anyway, it's all the fresh stuff. Either it's baked in house, or it's, you know, butchery, cheese, meat, but all the inside aisles, the ones that are like in front of you as you walk in, and they're either frozen foods or they're boxed foods or they're in a bag, and they have been prepared by someone else. Now, ignoring those things, first of all, will save you a lot of money because processed foods cost more. It will also make you healthier because there are a lot of empty calories in those products, and making it yourself will also increase your nutrition that you're actually getting. Ignoring advertising and marketing for specific food products is another way. Like, I remember when my kid was little and we went from not watching any TV when, you know, before he was 2 to starting to watch some cartoons together, and there were commercials. And during the cartoons, there are commercials for kids cereals, right? We all remember this. Well, the kids cereals tend to be the really sugary ones. And he got really excited. He was like, oh, I want to get that one. And I was like, let me tell you something, kid. If they have to get a cartoon character to sell you their cereal, it's probably not a very good cereal. He's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, they're trying to fool you into buying a crappy thing. And he was like, what? And I'm like, yeah. So like the next time we were in the supermarket, he's like, I don't want that one. I don't want that one. And I'm like, what about this one? He's like, well, there's no cartoon character on it. And I'm like, okay, well, let's look at the ingredients. What's in this cereal? And so, you know, he was very little at the time, but that lesson has stuck with him. And I think it's really important. And for adults, we don't use cartoon characters, we use celebrities, right? It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. If they need to have a celebrity sell you something like soda or energy drinks, chances are they're not very good for you, right? So ignore that stuff and stick to what you know to be healthy. And the overall diet schemes, and I say diet meaning dietary as opposed to like Weight Watchers or keto or whatever, are the Mediterranean diet and the Japanese diet. And they look very similar, actually. But I think the next slide is the one that shows them. Yes. So on the left, we've got the Mediterranean food pyramid, and on the right, we've got the food balance guide from Japan. So obviously one is just inverted, but they're both like pyramids or whatever. They do them slightly differently. But the thing I like about these, both of them, so we'll start with Mediterranean. So the base of it is fruits, vegetables, and grains, right? All the plant-based stuff. That is the vast majority of what Mediterranean countries say you should be eating. Mostly Italy, parts of France, Spain, people with pretty long lifespans and high qualities of life with low cholesterol and, you know, lower health problems than the United States. It's followed by fish and seafood being the next level. Now, obviously, they're near an ocean. We are not. Sadly, I miss the ocean, but we're not near an ocean. So fish and seafood, that still can happen, but it's going to be a different kind based on our bioregion. Then it's followed by poultry, eggs, cheese, and yogurt, right? And then if you look at the very top, they don't combine red meat with poultry, eggs, cheese, and yogurt, right? They are a different classification. So when you're looking at the frequency, it starts with every day, fruits, vegetables, and grains. And fish and seafood is often at least 2 times per week. And then poultry, eggs, cheese, and yogurt is, what does it say? Moderate portions, daily to weekly, but it's still less than fish and seafood. And when you look at meats and sweets, and they put them in the same category, isn't that interesting? Meats and sweets. We don't even have sweets on our food regulation, right? Because frankly, most of our stuff is sweet. Less often, it says. It says wine in moderation. It says drink water daily. It says you get freebies on olive oil, beans, nuts, legumes, and seeds, herbs, and spices. So all the flavorful stuff and beans and legumes. And daily physical activity is a part of what they talk about, because a diet is actually just one component of a healthy lifestyle. It needs to include hydration and it needs to include activity. Now, if you look at the Japanese version, it's inverted and it's slightly different, but it does include daily activity. You can see the person jogging around a glass of water. So it includes hydration. The grains are the basis, and you can see that there is a lot of rice there. Then it goes for vegetables, and then it's different kinds of proteins, but not, you know, you can't read it necessarily unless you read Japanese, but it talks about the types of proteins that are healthier. And then meats and cheeses, or sorry, milk and sweets are down there on the left. And then fruit, they put fruit down at the bottom. They don't include it in with vegetables because, you know, some people are very prone to sugars in any form, right? Diabetics have to watch their fruit intake too. So it's very interesting. And a lot of these come from the health conditions and genetic pool of the people that they're advising for. So you can see how they might be a little different for Japanese people than they would Mediterranean people. But you can see that there are some striking differences between this and what Americans, the you know, different health departments recommend. So, you know, it used to be the 4 food groups, then it was the food pyramid, now it's the My Plate. And there are 4 sections of My Plate with a little addition of glass of milk on the side. And you should know that My Plate didn't originally include the glass of milk and included it after much industry lobbying from the dairy industry. So again, like, we've seen over and over in this country that health information becomes politicized or gets convoluted with economic interests. And that's not what public health information should be. And so when I'm recommending dietary advice for my clients, I don't look at My Plate. Just like I don't necessarily turn to the CDC for health information, I turn to the World Health Organization and some other organizations when it comes to things about herbs or vaccines or any number of things, because science and health should be interest-free. I think it should be for the benefit of everyone who is getting the information, not the dairy industry. Now, one thing that might be new for everybody here is that herbal tonics, tonic herbalism, is a form of food as medicine. So a tonic is something that you take regularly. You know, you don't just take it when you have the flu or a headache. You take it on an ongoing basis, and it strengthens a system, an organ, or a reaction in the body. So it replaces food and nutrients that we should be getting through our food, but maybe we're not. You know, we've sort of, what's it called? Denatured a lot of our food in this country through big agribusiness. An apple from the 50s has higher nutrition than an apple today because of the way that we've denatured the soil and the chemicals that we use. And so wild plants, especially if you've got herbal products that have wild plants, they tend to have more nutrition. So the picture shows two forms of digestive bitters that my company makes. Now, bitters add the bitter flavor to what we ingest. Americans are notorious for avoiding the bitter flavor. We think it's gross. We think it's bad. We prefer sweet. And bitter is kind of the opposite of sweet. But I will tell you, bitter is actually necessary for our well-being. We have bitter receptors, not just on the tongue, you know, the sweet, salty, sour, bitter, umami thing that we learned as kids. We not only have them on the tongue, but we have them throughout the entire digestive tract, in our brain and in our lungs. And when they get stimulated by ingesting bitter food or drink, they stimulate proper functioning. We do not eat enough bitter in this country, which is why 25% of all doctor visits have to do with digestive issues in this country. It's why we have gallbladder removal. It's why we have liver issues. It's why IBS and IBD are such a huge thing, and why there is over-the-counter proton pump inhibitors like Zantac or Prilosec that people take a lot of. So this tonic is a digestive tonic, digestive bitters. And so it, oh, I just noticed my typo. Sorry, I hate typos. Anyway, herbal tonics are a form of food as medicine. And so this digestive tonic is helpful to people who's had any of the digestive issues that I was talking about, like in that litany that I had there. It allows us to focus on specific systems as well. So for example, I make this thing called fire cider, and I take it during the cold weather months. And what it does is it boosts immune system functioning. It boosts circulation, so your cold hands and feet kind of issues, but also enhancing circulation also enhances the immune functioning because your blood cells get all over the body. And it kills pathogens, right? So during cold weather, when we're all breathing recycled air and people are getting more sick, like fire cider is a great tonic to take. You do a little shot of it in the morning and you're on your way. Tonics are also easily made and grown like food. You can ingest them like food. One of the tonics that I take every day is I make what's called a golden milk with turmeric and ginger and black pepper and honey. And I whisk that into a milk, and I use oat milk because most of my family is lactose intolerant, so we don't use dairy. But I make like a carafe of it every week. And then every morning when I drink my coffee, like this, it has golden milk in it instead of, you know, cream or whatever. And what that does for me is it lowers the systemic inflammation in my body. I get really upset fingers. Like I'm starting to experience some osteoarthritis in my hands, and I do a lot of fine motor work, right? So like in my job, I'm counting pills, or I'm making medicines, or I like to embroider as a hobby. This keeps me flexible and pain free. I drink it every day. And that's a tonic, right? It's safe to do every day. It replaces food. Like there are cuisines like Indian food where you'd be eating turmeric every day. Um, and it's pretty much safe for anyone. Um, and Haven, the company that I work for, Haven Herbs, we have plenty of ready-made tonics for lots of different situations. It's one of the things I feel strongly about, using tonic herbalism to stay well rather than only dealing with herbalism when you're sick, right? Or when you have a problem. Staying well is a lot easier than treating illness, I'll tell you that.
Lily, we have a question. It says, what do you put in the golden milk again? Turmeric and
Yeah. So turmeric and black pepper synergize each other. So if you put a little bit of black pepper in with your turmeric, it's going to make it more bioavailable to you. So it's always got black pepper. I also put ginger in there because ginger enhances circulation and tastes good. And then I suspend all those powdered herbs in honey, right? So it's kind of like a paste. I call it turmeric tea paste. And I just take spoonfuls of that and I put it in a pot of oat milk and I just whisk it until the honey dissolves. And then I pour it in a carafe and I just keep it in the fridge all week. Yeah. All right. So I have a handout that I'm going to be, that Darlene is going to be sending you. And it has some recipes on it. But I also want to encourage you to look for other types of recipes that might get you started on a food as medicine journey. So I do have a recipe for vegan mushroom broth in there, which can stand in for bone broth if you are vegan. Bone broth is a fantastic way of getting lots of minerals and collagen into your body if those are things that your body particularly craves. I tend to use either an instant pot or a crock pot to make mine. I get pastured animal bones and I put them in there with a lot of water and I just cook the crap out of them until they start disintegrating. And then I use it in recipes, or I'll drink it on its own. It takes some getting used to, bone broth, because it's got all that collagen in it, which is kind of slippery. But it's amazing for your health. It's good for gut health. If you've got gut issues, bone broth helps to get rid of leaky gut syndrome, but vegan mushroom broth will do the same thing. And I highly suggest you look at different kinds of mushrooms. So when I say mushrooms, I'm not talking about those little buttons that you get at Kroger. I'm talking about oyster mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms, maitake mushrooms. Like on the handout that you're getting, it has some resources. And the first one is a grocery store that's aimed at immigrant populations here in Columbus called Saraga. And Saraga has an amazing produce section. And they have an entire display of all these different kinds of mushrooms. I say play with it, right? Pick ones that you've never had before on top of ones that you're more familiar with, and make a vegan mushroom broth that you can store. You can freeze it well. Like the thing is if you make a bunch of broth, maybe you live alone. Maybe you can only have like a little bit at a time. You can freeze it in ice cube trays, right? And then once the ice cube trays are frozen, you can pop it into a baggie and keep that. And then you can heat it up as needed or for recipes or whatever. But getting started with that is really wonderful, especially in the winter months. Who doesn't like a hot soup or a broth? I highly recommend getting into fermented foods. There are some local companies that make krauts and kvases, kombuchas, but you can also do it yourself. It's super easy. And there are places that you can get fermenting supplies. It really only takes like mason jars and some specialty tops. I have these cool things called pickle pipes, and they're silicone, and they just replace the lid of a mason jar. And they have enough ventilation that the ferment off gases, and it's not going to explode your char. Don't be scared. But I make all kinds of fermented foods. Right now I'm fermenting a hot sauce because I like hot sauce. And capsaicin in hot peppers is also really good for the joints and the blood and all of that. And we also always have a batch of kombucha going. And I have like a top that's like a screen that keeps bugs out and keeps critters out, but like allows it to breathe. So fermented foods are great for the gut. They're great for the brain. They make nutrition more bioavailable. And if you do it yourself, like you can make exactly what you like. Adding adaptogens into your food and beverage. So all those mushrooms that I mentioned, most of them have adaptogenic qualities. And an adaptogen is a class of herbs that tonifies the adrenal system and usually some other system. My favorite mushroom, which is hard to get to cook with, is called reishi because it's hard and woody. Reishi is not only an adaptogen, but it's an immunomodulator. It helps your immune system make better choices. And it's suitable for people with cancer because it doesn't boost the immune system, but it modulates the immune system. So it's very helpful in that way. Making lots of sauces and salsas and compotes and chutneys are a way of getting lots of yummy, tasty plant material and putting it on, like if you're having pork chops, making a compote with a bunch of different fresh herbs and fruits and things, and then putting it on your pork chop completely changes your pork chop. But it also adds a boost of plant material. And soups are another great way of enjoying all kinds of foods that maybe you wouldn't get into your system otherwise. Lots of vegetables can go into soup. Lots of whole grains like barley. I love barley in soup. It's so yummy. But like, who eats barley otherwise? Barley's weird. But yeah, getting soups is one way of getting in a lot more nutrition. And you can also freeze your leftover soup, or you can share it with a friend. Making a big old pot of soup is a lovely thing to share.
Lily,
Yeah.
we have a question in the chat. Can cancer survivors have honey?
As a class of people, I would say yes. There are obviously individual caveats. Honey is as good as the quality of the honey, right? So you want to get it directly from a beekeeper, I would say, someone who takes good care of their hives. A lot of commercially available honey, like at Kroger or whatever, comes from China, and it's not really honey. It's adulterated with other things, and maybe adulterated with things that are harmful. I always try and tell people to get honey not only from beekeepers directly, but beekeepers that are within 30 miles of where you live. Because not only is it nutritious and medicinal, but it also will help you ingest the local pollens. And if you get seasonal allergy issues, it's going to lessen those over time because you're ingesting those pollens and getting used to them. If you have specific concerns, for you in particular, obviously you want to talk to your oncologist. Like that's just a regular thing. But as a class of people, right, yes, cancer people can have it. Cancer people, what did I just say? People who have survived cancer can have honey. And, there's been a debate a long time about honey, also with babies, right? They tell you newborn babies can't have honey. Well, there's a debate about that. There's a debate whether it creates allergies to wait or it creates allergies to start right away. We don't have all the data. What we do have is generational and anecdotal evidence that many people give honey to babies across the world, and it doesn't seem to cause the kinds of problems that they thought it caused. But again, it's an individual choice. And if you have specific concerns, talking to your doctor is like the best thing to do. Yeah, so on the handout, where is that? I have it here. I just want to kind of, oh, there it is. You have it, great. So it talks a little about tonic herbalism, and it also has some great recipes. So a vegan gut healing broth, a lymphatic drainage salad. So, after chemo and radiation are done, getting rid of lymph stagnation, because, it can be really painful to have swollen lymph. Getting rid of that stagnation and draining the lymph is particularly helpful after your treatment is done. And so these particular things can help do that, along with some dry brushing or lymphatic massage. If you have liver issues, you're concerned about your liver taking a hit from medications or from chemo, you can make a tea that helps love your liver. And burdock, I put burdock/gobo. So gobo is the Japanese name for burdock, and you can get it at Saraga fresh. And you'll get a lot more than you need, but it comes in these big, long tap roots, usually 3 in a bundle. And you can also cook with it and put it in your soup. So definitely eat it. It's good for you, and it cleanses your liver. I also listed some tonic herbs in herbalism and what they tend to do. And I used herbalist action words. So a nutritive is something that is nutritious, right? It fortifies the body. It strengthens the body because there's nutrition there. Anti-inflammatory, we kind of know what that is because there's some pharmaceuticals that a lot of people take that are anti-inflammatory. Digestive means that it soothes the gut. Choleretic means that it is good for the gallbladder. Antimicrobial means it fights germs, whether that's bacteria or virus. Chamomile is a nervine sedative. We know chamomile tea makes people sleepy, right? It calms the nervous system. A refrigerant, when I said it for mint, it's a cooler. It like cools you down, like cucumber and mint, they're cooling, they're a refrigerant. And so if you are having hot flashes, mint tea is a nice way of like cooling down your body, for example. Ginger, I wrote rubefacient. What that means is it enhances circulation. And cleavers is a nutritive as well as a lymphatic cleanser. So in addition to the foods that are up above in the recipe, you can also use cleavers as a lymphatic cleanser, and they are tonic level, meaning you can take them regularly without worrying about taking too much. I also included some books to get you started on really good nutrition and how to cook. Nourishing Traditions is a classic, and it'll give you all kinds of whole food, slow food recipes. The Mediterranean diet, obviously, and Herbal Tonic Therapies, which give you some recipes on how to take tonics and what they're good for. And then I went ahead and listed Saraga Market, as well as me personally, if you have herbalist questions, and Haven Herbs, the company that I formulate herbal medicine for, on there so that you can find us.
Great. That's a wonderful wealth of information, Lily. We're very thankful for you sharing that. Does anybody have any last minute questions for Lily?
Yeah, that last page with all the information, is that going to be emailed to us?
Yes. Everybody who's on the call today will receive both the handout that Lily just reviewed, as well as the PDFs that she went over.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Darlene.
Yes.
Let me make a plug for the rest of the folks on this. I was diagnosed with stage 3 in 2016, and it took 2 years to get under control before I was cancer-free, but it came back a year and a half later, and it came back in 2020. And what they were doing for me wasn't beating the cancer. We couldn't get it back into remission. So I did do what we just talked about here. I went on a nutrition and exercise criteria. And by doing away with the sugars and the carbohydrates and the dairies, um, the cancer went back into remission. So it does work. And in the
Awesome.
process, I lost 45 pounds. So,
Well, thank you, Richard, for sharing your the testimony with us to let us know it really does work.
but that came off of that one we had with Revive about a year ago now.
Mhm.
So, because the cancer treatments just weren't working anymore. Anyway, what it's worth.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Lily while we have her?
What's our next topic next month? Do we
So
have
so next month on February the 14th at 1 o'clock, Lily's going to be doing the DIY skin natural care. So this is a great session where she's going to be talking about making your own moisturizers, cleansers, serums, and face masks naturally. And the class will point out bad ingredients that you should avoid in many store-bought products, as well as how to make these at home with minimal ingredients. And recipes will be shared so you can follow along if you wish. So that'll be on the 14th of February. Well, Lily, we greatly appreciate you, even with the change in your lifestyle, with moving your home and getting a new job, and changing the day and time of this session. We're very thankful that you continue to provide our natural living workshop on a volunteer basis, and very thankful that you continue to share your expertise and knowledge with us. We really appreciate everything that you do. And everybody look for that email from me that'll have the handouts from Lily. Her contact information, as she mentioned, will be on those, either in the PFD or on that handout, and you can reach out to her directly for individual consultation. And I'll leave that up between the two of you of how you work that out. So
Thanks,
thank you so
everybody.
much.
Have a good day.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.